I just wanted to thank those of you willing and able to participate in the conversation, um, making me think. That's why there's been a string of videos as of late, because some of you are making me think, and I appreciate that. And once again, to all of you who are just little kids, you get triggered and you attack me personally. Yeah, if you're not making arguments, chances are I will erase you because you're just clutter, right? You guys are like roaches in the kitchen. You know what I mean? If I'm that dumb or I'm so wrong about stuff, but point out the flaws in logic, point out the errors, and I make them. You know, they're there, so just point them out, right? But if you're gonna come around here and say that Ukraine was genociding Russians, right, which is weird, and not the other way around, you're gonna get called out on your bullshit. You know what I mean? If Ukraine wanted to genocide Russia, why would they give up their nukes, right? For example. Also, look up in the dictionary what genocide means. Uh, Stop with the dog whistles. Stop with the demagoguery. Like, that shit doesn't get no play around here, okay? That shit doesn't. Just because it worked on you, it triggered you into the inability to think for yourself. That's not. Just grow the fuck up. You know what I mean? And if you're gonna come around here and spread some bullshit that's verifiably so, I'm gonna call you out on it if I feel like it. And because you're grown, right? You're gonna be able to deal with it. You're gonna be able to say, "Oh, that makes sense," or you're gonna refute what I have to say. And one last thing about that: disagreeing, just saying I disagree, or you're stupid, or whatever, right? You're wrong, whatever. That's fine, right? But just don't call it a refutation or an argument because it isn't. And yes, if you just keep cluttering the comment section, I will erase your comment unless you make an argument or at least attempt an argument, right? Jesus. Anyway, so as we talk about this shit, right? Another thing, God, you're such a fucking idiot, dude. I mean, it's true, and yeah, I'm a dick, but I tell you this because in some sense I care, right? Like, stop being a fucking idiot, because that's why humanity is in the pickle that we're in. It's because there's a bunch of fucking idiots running around. But this fucking idiot, man, telling us that Crimea was always Russia. Like, what? Fucking hell. Anyway, as I talk a little bit, let's look at what Russia was, where it came from, right? And how it this idea that, like, what, God just ordained Russia to be this and it was always this and the West has just been taking bites out of Russia. Like, how fucking retarded do you have to be to say some dumb shit like that? Like, have you ever taken a history class? Anyway, um, what's this video about? History of Russia. Looking at the map. That's right. So, it is true that the West uses this word democracy, and there's some truth to it, to brainwash people, right? And to spread their sphere of influence and to justify it, right? That's the ideology, right? That's from shit for mass consumption, basically, right? So what U.S. Well, I don't have to explain this. We all know this, right? Democracy is an excuse to invade countries, topple governments, yada yada yada, right? And as of late, anyway, for Russia, it's been degeneracy, right? They use degeneracy to justify their territorial expansion, uh, expanding their sphere of influence and killing people too, right? Because they're degenerates, right? Which is coincidentally what Hitler did. I don't know, maybe they're running this psyop because uh, it works on the European people. Maybe he's doing that because, well, whatever. We're gonna let that one go. Anyway, but, and this isn't a big part of the rhetoric, they're also kind of hypocritical, both sides, right? Because, well, Russia spreads democracy, right? Promotes democracy, and U.S. fights degeneracy, also, right? Now these are, but that's politics, right? They have to give the people, at least to some degree, what they want, right? The more they're able to brainwash them, the less they have to give them what they want, right? And if they're able to brainwash them and give them what they want more so than the other guy, they're gonna win. Well, they're gonna win the hearts and minds of the people. So this idea on part of Putin that criticizing the West for spreading democracy. Well, motherfucker, is it Russia officially a democracy? Right? Now, yes, we can talk about the corruption and how it's not ready. Yeah, you could say the same about the West. There's plenty of voter fraud, there's plenty of corruption, just as there is in Russia. But superficially, right, they're both democracies, right? Of course they are. I mean, what about, and this is what gets me, right? All these right wing, wokey woke Antifas, you guys don't fucking know what you are. Like, let's just keep it real, right? You have no fucking, you have no identity. You don't know what you are. Except this is the team you play for, and whatever your big bad boss or God or father figure, right? However you see Putin or whoever is in charge on the other side, um, whatever daddy tells you is what you do. That's what it comes down to, right? Because I'm still waiting for somebody to explain to me how the right wing, who was so anti-Antifa when Trump was in power, became Antifa. The Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis, we have to get the Nazis. Fuck. Oh my God. Anyway, so yeah, what about guys? Guys, if you're so anti-democracy like Daddy Putin, well, what the fuck do those Donbass referendum have to do with anything? Why are those valid, right? Oh, the people of the U.S. spreads democracy, which we're against. But the people of Donbass voted to be part of Russia, which they never did, by the way. But they voted to be part of Russia, so now you're pro-democracy. Like, which is it? Are you pro-democracy, anti-democracy? Which is? Well, you say whatever Daddy tells you to say. Sorry, I mean. So yeah, Russia spreads democracy, right? Of course they do, while at the same time criticizing it. How hypocritical is that? Now, on the other hand, Russia criticizes Western degeneracy, right? And I agree. Just with that part, right? Putin talks about all the stuff that I've talked about on the channel, right? Which is why I was, uh, I had, I had a lot of time for someone like Putin, right? So I mean, I had to wake up too, right? I had to come to my senses also. But I had a lot of time for him, but it's like maybe you could justify one war, but then you're just on and on and on and on, attacking your neighbors and proving over time that you're no different than all those imperial. Like, yeah, they were different people, and some of them were better, some of them were worse. Don't get me wrong, right? But at, at the end of the day, um, let's pause right here, right? So Finland at one point became, well, Finlandized, right? It became de facto part of Russia, kind of like Poland under the Warsaw Pact was under Soviet control, right? It kind of like Chechnya is right now, right? Kind of like what he wants to make Ukraine into. Take some of it, incorporate it into the Federation, Russian Federation, and then vassalize the rest of it, or whatever, right? So, right, the justification is that, well, Russia didn't want to have a border with NATO, meaning didn't want Ukraine to join NATO, right? Because that's a no-no, right? So the assumption is that, you know, if Ukraine, because Ukraine wanted to be part of NATO, it was de facto becoming part of NATO. That's why he invaded, right? Well, if it were de facto part of NATO, then NATO would have bombed the fuck out of and destroyed U.S. military bases, maybe all over the world, right? But if that's what we're gonna go with, then Finland, that was always part of Russia, right? Or in the first place, Finland was part of Russia in the first place. Weird, because they don't speak Russian there. Did they vote to be part of Russia? Anyway, if they, and it looks like they will be, they just need to send a couple more earthquakes, and it looks like they are, to Turkey, and Erdogan, Khan, that king will permit it finally, right? But let's say Finland becomes part of NATO, right? When it was part of Russia in the first place, well then Putin's gonna invade Finland, right? He'll have no choice but to invade Finland. I mean, he already had a border with NATO, and he wasn't invading Poland. They did invade Poland many times, but yeah, a few times over the course of history, right? Uh, Poland, by the way, and the miracle at the Vistula River, or whatever, however they say that in English, right, is the reason why, the Russian Empire was contained, the Bolsheviks, right? Because who knows if it wasn't for, you know, rinky dinky little Poland standing up to the Bolshevik wannabe empire, the Russian Empire. I don't know. Maybe some of you Germans would be learning Russian in school right now. Could be, right? But that might be welcomed in that part of the world by some people. So anyway, back to degeneracy. So much as, Russia attacks Western degeneracy, and that's part of their rhetoric. Well, Russia is degenerate as fuck, right? Corruption, alcoholism, crazy crime. Their government is basically run like their prison system, right? It's a mafia. Their government resembles, more like a organized crime uh, than any sort of legitimate, democracy. And there's some of that in the West too. It's not as bad. It's not as corrupt. It's not as murderous. But anyway, yeah. So much as they criticize degeneracy, what they really mean is certain kind of degeneracy, because they are very degenerate themselves, just in different ways, right? I mean, look at what USSR was, right? And how that's degenerated and fallen apart, right? Russia is in decay. That's why they're, well, trying not to fucking die. When Putin talks about existential threat, he's not talking about Russian identity dying or Russia stopping to exist, right? It's the Russian Empire being uh, the continued dissolution of the Russian Empire, right? That's it. That's what he's talking about. Anyway, so much as he criticizes Western degeneracy, right? And he is spreading, th- if only for now, right, in the hearts and minds of people, he is spreading that idea, right? Fighting that kind of degeneracy, convincing people. He is fighting that degeneracy, like for real. I mean, look at how how many Westerners respond well to Putin because of that, right? While at the same time he's very degenerate. But and U.S. isn't. They make fun of the things that Putin says, insofar as LGBT, pedophilia, which I really resent. But so it's not as much part of U.S. rhetoric as it is in Russia, right? Both democracy and degeneracy. U.S. rhetoric is mostly on democracy, but U.S. also is also fighting Russian degeneracy, right? In a sense, because the countries that come under the sphere of influence of the West, NATO, U.S., right? The people in those countries, they prosper, right? Not all of them necessarily, but ultimately, at the end of the day, once the West is able to exert its influence over these countries, especially the former Soviet republics or countries um, under Russian influence, people in those countries prosper, right? There's less corruption over time. People are better able to afford things. Their standard of living goes up, right? All of a sudden, they have access to toilets, running water, um, hot water, heated apartment, right? Central heating, nicer cars, better communication, better transportation. Like they progress, right? In that sense, they they have access to more technology. Their lives become um, easier, if you will, right? It's not as degenerate as Russia. It's not as broken down, right? The standard of living is raised, right? So yeah, this rhetoric that both of these empires use is for the most part, there's truth to it, right? Definitely there has to be truth to it in order for people to accept it. But so much as Russia yammers on about democracy and how that's somehow evil and I guess degenerate, right? When it's convenient, Russia uses democracy to attain its political goals. And so much as US is being criticized for being degenerate in certain ways, and that's correct, right? Russia's just as degenerate, if not worse, just in different ways. And US, as degenerate as it is, actually combats certain kind of degeneracy, the kind of degeneracy that's found in USSR, right? Oh, sorry, Russia, the Russian Federation. So at the end of the day, right, when we cut through all the bullshit, at the end of the day, well, what do we have here, right? Well, one empire fighting another empire. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. That's what this always was. And until one of these gives up the fight or is beaten, knocked the fuck out, basically, this will forever be so because that is the way of the world, right? And all this fucking drivel about all this other shit, right? Yeah, there's truth to it. There has to be. But that's just a bunch of bullshit and hypocrisy, right? Look at Russia in the 1800s, 1845, 1882, 83, right? Are they in Crimea yet? Bolsheviks, Soviet Union, 1923, right? The Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, right? That's the Soviet Union at its grandest, right? Now we're gonna get to 91. Oops. right? And it's been degenerating since, in a sense, right? Oh, right? See the degeneration? So, obviously, that's what Putin wants, right? He wants to reverse course because Russia as an empire has been degenerating for the last 30 years, right? So, if you have a different opinion, hopefully that opinion is based on something other than what daddy told you to think, right? And you've actually convinced yourself using facts or truth, better yet, uh, reason and logic, right? And because that is how you convince yourself of your beliefs and it's not what daddy told you to believe, you're going to be able to present those same arguments that convinced you, right? And if you can't, then how were you convinced? Rhetoric, feelings, right? Emotion, right? I hope that makes sense. Thanks for watching.